But Greg Olson wants to make a few comments before we get started. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. The chapter is kicking off the online auction and 3x100 drawing tonight. So online auction, we usually start that beginning of February, end up like around the third week of February. We still haven't set the exact dates for that, but so first of all, we need your donations for the online auction. I mean, if you're like me and have more gear than you can use, and unlike me, you realize that you can't use it all, donate it to the chapter and we'll put it on the online auction. You know, gently used rods, reels, nets, any kind of fishing gear. Guided trips go really well, so if you are a guide, if you know a guide, or you're just a good fisher person that perhaps, you know, you're really good at tenkara, you're really good at Euro nymphing, you might want to, you know, guide someone, and we'd really appreciate that. You know, I think most of you are familiar with our auction, but, you know, paintings, art, gift cards, jars of honey, you name it, you know, we'll take it, put it on the auction. You know, if you happen to be sitting at your favorite restaurant and think, you know, more people should know about this place. It's an awesome restaurant. We probably have 2,500 at least people looking at our auction. So, I mean, it's good advertising for the business. And, you know, businesses, they like to donate to a good cause. So, yeah, approach them, ask them if they will donate to our auction. So any items that you donate or collect, you can drop off at Lund's Fly Shop or Bend Fly Shop, or you can bring them to a chapter meeting, or you can reach out to me, Greg Olson, and I'll get it from you. So thanks in advance for that. Also, we're kicking off the 3x100 drawing tonight. I just got the tickets. We have again the Norling rod, a 7.5 foot bamboo 5-weight rod with 2 tips. Don't have that on hand tonight, but you know, it's the same rod that we've been having every year. Cunningham painting again from Joshua Cunningham. He's still deciding between 3 paintings. I've seen 2 of the paintings and they're beautiful, you know, area streams. And he's working on a 3rd. He's going to decide which one to donate. And then, so both of those, the tickets are $20 a piece. We also have a sage rod. It's actually up here if you want to take a look at it tonight. It's called the R8 Classic. It's medium to medium fast action. It's an 8.5 4-weight, kind of reminiscent of the old Sage light line rods or Scott G or Winston IM6. Just a really sweet actioned fly rod, just perfect for the smaller dry flies and nymphs in our area. So check that out. As you know, in the past and we will be doing this year, we just use a random number generator to draw the name, and we will be doing that again. But to kick things off tonight, I will allow you to play whatever lucky numbers you want. So if you buy a ticket tonight, if you don't have the money, you can just make a donation tonight or tomorrow on our Kiap-TU-Wish website. I'll just make a donation. I'll know that you were buying tickets, or you can tell me that the check is in the mail. I know where you all live, so. Yeah. So I think that's it. Check out that rod. I got the tickets. Let me know how many you want.
4, baby, 4.
How much is that rod?
10.
I'm sorry, $10 for the stage rod only.
There's only
Bargain.
100 tickets per drawing.
100 tickets per drawing, yep. And that sage rod is just shy of $1,000. I think it retails for like $975. Brand new, warranty card, everything.
There's only 96 left.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, Greg. He does a great job on this. I think you've been doing it, what, 4 years?
I think so.
It's a pro.
Only 10 more to go.
Pardon? Well, welcome to everybody. I just want to go through a few things. I see Kent is in the back of the room there. The board spent about a 2-hour time frame at the last board meeting, and we basically discussed stream monitoring, past, present, and future, and basically taking a look at where we've come from. Started in 1992 and took the time frame up to 2024, and then did the 2 years that I started as presidency, and then the future of what we're going to do in the next 2 to 5 years. And essentially, in 1992, started out with Pine Creek, added a number, and actually did a restoration, and started the stream monitoring, temperature monitoring, was started on Pine Creek with Kent's.
Kenny.
No, it was Pine. I read his stuff. Well, it could have been Kinney by somebody else. But what we've done is essentially gone with what Ken's been doing. And somebody can correct me on that, I might. But went into the Coldwater Library and really read a number of articles that Kent has put together and actually given to us as far as the history of the stream monitoring. What we really wanted to take a look at, though, is that we're up from 1 stream to 7 streams, or 8 streams. We have 33 loggers in place. We want to talk to the DNR and ask, do we need all the temperature loggers, and can we get rid of a few? So there's some work that we're going to do. But our major goal was to talk about succession planning, and actually talking with Kent and John Kaplan. It's what does the future hold for us, and how are we going to get other people involved to do a handoff? And so we spent a lot of time. There's some further discussion naturally that's going to go on with that, but that's a starting point, and succession planning is really important. Secondly, the South Fork of the Kinney, the willows are out, spraying was done, and the Earl structures are installed, and there are 20, I think 26 or 28. The fall spraying was done, right? And so we still have that cost that we need to pay out on that. The maintenance committee met today with the DNR, and they really discussed prescribed burn quote on the South Fork, and that was presented by, Dalby Conservation Services has submitted a proposal to the chapter about what that might cost, and it's dollars. So, we're going to talk about that at the board. But they're really suggesting that we do controlled burn 3 consecutive years in order to get it under control, and then move on from there, whether we do it every other year or whatever. So that's really to keep the willows under control. And then the habitat projects for the winter brushing and burning. We'll talk about all of that at the board meeting next week. The other announcements, other than the Greg's announcement on the auction, is the holiday awards banquet is December 2nd, first Tuesday of December. And we have changed it up that we have an entree buffet of pork loin or wood-fired bone-on chicken, roasted red potatoes, green beans, cookies, and bars for dessert. So we're not going to have the hors d'oeuvres as we've had in the past few years. We really had feedback that we wanted to do something different. I talked to Jeff Wellesley, and he said he has done this type of a buffet entree for other organizations. He did a big one for the Boy Scouts, and he said it goes fine. The way he'll set it up is that he was going to add more servers so that they will serve as you go through the line. You don't have to pre-pick. If you want a little bit of both, you'll get a smaller portion than if you only took pork. So it's kind of like that. He's going to bartend because he's a good bartender, and he's going to do it in the room. And I think he's going to have like 5 standard drinks. Otherwise, you can go to the bar and order your own. I did get the ticket information from Allison Jacobs today. It's on Eventbrite, and the tickets will be ready to be purchased tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. So I told her that I would be the first one online to purchase those. So. The Moody property, I just need to make kind of a discussion. Actually, Clark or Gary, Ed, myself, Scott Wagner, Scott's back there, and then Mike Kerr. They organized a meeting with Senator Rob Staffholz. The legislature did not pass the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. And he was invited to actually do a site visit of the Moody property, which was really restored and an easement. And there were monies from the Knowles Nelson Fund, Stewardship Fund and the Trout Stamp. They didn't pass either one, not the Stewardship Fund or the Trout Stamp this year. And we spent a good hour and a half with him, and hoping that he will go back to the legislature and vote or get this changed over and see whether or not we can't get it approved. I did read Mike Kerr's letter back to the senator, and his suggestion is that they divide the monies so that acquisition is not dovetailed with restoration, that they would split out the funds, and maybe that might help a little bit. So we're hoping that that's going to have a positive turn. But while I was at the Moody property, I had a one-on-one conversation with Bobby Moody, and Katie, I'm not sure if that's his daughter or granddaughter or who, but Katie lives on the property, and she does not want individuals crossing the property when they access the stream. There's an easement on the backside of Aldi's parking lot, and then there's one by the bridge on Paul Avenue. And I know that there was a bit of a heated discussion that I think went on between the DNR, so Casey and Nate were called to the property and had this discussion. And it's no trespassing posted on the land all around, and they've notified law enforcement. So she really does not want individuals coming down the driveway, which is really accessible. It'd be easy to park in her parking lot, or her little parking lot. But you can get onto enter by Aldi's, and then once you're in the stream, you can still walk the bank. And so she's really firm about this. And he asked if I wouldn't make an announcement at the chapter. So.
You can get in at the Powell Avenue Bridge too.
Okay. on Paul Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah, by the bridge.
Yes.
Yes, yes. He did say that the woman, the elderly woman that owns the land, I think west of the bridge, I think has considerable land that she's considering a discussion to have with the DNR to, have an easement and have that portion of the stream restored. So Moody's been talking with her and trying to convince her to, kind of extend that. And then the other announcement, I just want you to know that KCC has struggled trying to get itself reorganized in this past year after Judy's death. And it's really fragmented and hasn't really come together the way it had been. And what we found out via Amy Peterson, and that the city did receive notification from the court that the plan and design plan for the next phase, so feasibility was paid for. That was $700,000. $350,000 was between the city and KCC, and we participated in getting those monies together. And Trout Unlimited, both in Wisconsin and in Minnesota, basically gave close to $130,000 of that $175,000. What happened is there is another $700,000 that's on the table, and that's for the design. And so the Corps usually pays $350,000, so there's another $350,000. And basically, we're not in a position to, KCC's not in a position to basically do fundraising. And as a chapter, I said more than once in some of the meetings that we're not in a position as a chapter to be funding this next phase. This is a surprise for us. So we're kind of in a situation of what's going to happen. You know, is it one dam going to come out? Will they proceed to have both dams? Will the city take responsibility for 350? You know, I'm looking around here and basically supporting the fact that we are not going to spend our money that we raise for the restoration and the work that we do collaboratively with the DNR and with other organizations, that we can't come up with another $175,000. So that's kind of where we're at. Disappointing. I mean, we put a lot of faith in the fact that it would move forward. One scenario could be that the Powell Falls Dam comes out and Junction Falls doesn't. And they recertify it and it sits there for essentially non-functional, but till 2030. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think you needed to know that this is kind of what's been going on. I've been attached to the emails that have gone between Steve Goff, who's the president of KCC, trying to reorganize it. Gary has been approached to be a board member, can participate, but it's really dysfunctional at this point. When they've had some meetings, there hasn't been a quorum. And so Bob Luck has been interested. There's others, I think, that have stepped forward. So we'll see what happens, whether or not KCC can get pulled back together and be a source, but they're not the bank. And I think that's the point they're trying to say to the city. And so that's kind of where we're at. Sorry about that, but I think you needed to know that. Any questions of me? Yeah. Okay. I would like to introduce our speakers for this evening, and it's Steve Leonard, who's the Executive Director for KLRT, and Barney Engel, who's the Land Stewardship Manager for KLRT. They will present an update of the efforts of the Kinnickinnic River Land Trust and the efforts of the Headwaters Preserve and the work St. Croix County and farmers are doing in the upper watershed to protect water quality in new educational programs. So please welcome both Marty and Steve.
Thank you very much for having us tonight to talk about the Kinnickinnic River Land Trust. I've been with the organization now going on 3 years. I came from the Ridges Sanctuary. Was a nonprofit land trust on the eastern side of the state. I was there for 15 years, accomplished a lot, and took on this position here. What I love about this position, it's watershed based. And I think that's what's critical, is so many times the land trust will focus on a project area, but not really understand how these watersheds work. And not only it's watershed based, but when you start to look at all the stakeholders in this watershed, from the ag community to the communities, to the university. Robert Boss, I'm gonna point you out. He's our student intern, helping Marty out with easements and habitat restoration. And then it's organizations like TU, Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, all the different players here. So it's a great opportunity to really look at a river or watershed and how can we create a model with all these different stakeholders to apply it to other watersheds. So this is our mission when you really start to look at it. It's how do we get all these different stakeholders involved to understand their watershed address? And I think that's what's critical is everybody has an opportunity to help the river in some way. They know the connection to where their backyard is in relationship to the Kinney. I'm going to turn it over to Marty. Marty can give a little bit of a background. I'm sure most people know Marty, but he handles all our easements and land acquisition.
Okay, as everybody knows, or most everybody knows, I'm a retired fisheries biologist from this area. I worked out of Baldwin for 30 years before retiring in 2017. I started with the Land Trust in 19, working part-time 2 days a week. I do all the property acquisition and the property management. We currently have 40 conservation easements and another one in the work. They total over 2,000 acres right now. The current one I'm working on has 143 acres. We also, over the course of time, the Land Trust has purchased lands, and because we have limited staff, we do not manage those, and those have been turned over to DNR. So the Quarry Road area, Mannion's across from Drewski Preserve, if you know where that is. Nagel's way up in the headwaters. These are wildlife areas or manages wildlife areas. There's been other lands that we purchased down on the lower river that we turned over to the state park. There's some land right in town that the city manages, but we have conservation easements on them. So anyhow, we have that, and we have 4 nature preserves that are open to the public that we manage. The Drewski Preserve, if you're not familiar with that, that's access to the lower canyon that consists of a half-mile access lane into a 40, and the river goes right through the 40. There's a switchback down to it. Very popular area for fishermen to access that. Kelly Creek Preserve is actually a Kelly Spring head. We have 66 acres. There's about 15 acres of woodland and about 40 some acres of prairie that's been restored back in the 90s as prairie. We continue to manage that as prairie, doing burns and invasive species control and that sort of thing. Our very headwater property is called the Headwater Preserve. That's between Roberts and Hammond. It's at the very head end of the Kinney where it first begins to flow. Not up in the head of the dry runs, but where the actual springs begin. That's just north of the interstate. And that was 49 acres. That's open to the public. We recently gained access to that and we started managing that, and we're converting it from pine plantation to prairie, and I'll talk more about that later. And our last property is a community forest, which TU has helped us purchase and develop. That's downstream of Glen Park, sandwiched between the city's Glen Park system and the community forest. And that was a very important purchase for the school forest because we gained access to the school forest, who has 66 acres of landlocked land since the 40s, and they didn't have access until we made that purchase, and we made an agreement with them to allow public access. But the community forest is, again, a half-mile access lane with a parking lot on Double F, and there's 40 acres of upland and lowland woodland, and the Kinney runs through it, and Rocky Branch drains into that area. So down where the kiosk is and where the kiln is, that's kind of the area we're talking about. Okay, so let me talk more about the Headwater Preserve. So the Headwater Preserve was purchased back in the 90s, and there was a grant from Ducks Unlimited and Stewardship to help pay for that. It's about, oh God, how many acres is that right now? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But anyhow, there's 29 acres of pine plantation and probably 7-8 acres of upland woods and lowland along the stream. And the headwaters, again, is located between Hammond and Roberts. It's a wetland complex, and it's where the stream begins to flow. So 70th Avenue is on the north side, and the stream can be somewhat intermittent there, depending on how wet things have been in recent history. It may be flowing, it may not be. It's pretty much impounded by beavers, but it is a big headwater complex there. For many years, the property could not be managed because we did not have access. So when I first came on board, we were able to secure access lane 66 feet wide off of 70th Avenue, and we put a parking lot in. So we gained access that allowed us to begin managing the property. The plan was to convert the pine plantation to prairie. We met with the DNR foresters, and they issued us an invasive species control grant for $20,000 to control all invasives on the entire property. So they came in and cut and girdled all the large box elder, buckthorn, honeysuckle in one treatment, and then they came back in the fall and did small plant foliar spray treatments to kill those. Forester wanted us to do that before we did any logging because they didn't want us to do a buckthorn release or a box elder release on the property. So next came logging. We hired a contractor to come in and log off the pine, and part of the deal was that they had to compile all the brush that was left, all the tops from the trees into piles. So we landed up with like 50 piles of brush that we needed to burn. And thanks to many volunteers, we had 5,500 hours of volunteer service to burn those brush piles. And I want to thank Jeff here, Jeff Dahl, who's been one of the primary guys there every day, John Skelton, and Dave Gregg, along with many other people here tonight that came out and helped. But anyhow, we spent last winter burning all 50 of those brush piles, and it was something else to see those fires go up. Some of those brush piles were probably, I don't know, 20 yards across, you know, and 20 feet high, and they attracted attention from the interstate, and we've got numerous fire calls, and but we had to stay on that, and so we really didn't have any problems, but big fires. So we got it all cleaned up this spring, and the next step to the restoration was spraying all the weeds. We actually want to kill all vegetation, so this fall when we plant prairie seed, there's no competition from weeds or any grasses. So that required herbicide treatments 3 times during this summer, and the last one just occurred now to kill the last of the cool season plants that are still green out there. Right now it kind of looks like a desert. Everything's dead out there, and that's exactly what we want. The next step is prairie planting. Part of this process, we got an EQIP grant from NRCS and through the Pheasant Forever biologist, Cody Tromberg, to pay for the spraying of the weeds, the purchase of the seed, and the seed cost about $14,000–15,000, and then the planting. So the seed is now purchased, and that will be spread as what they call frost seeding. And they spread that around the first slight snowfall. They'll spread that, and it'll lay dormant in the ground, and the freeze-thaw process will work it into the soil, and it'll start sprouting next year. So that's where we're at with that. We couldn't do any standard like grain drill planting because there's too many stumps. So it had to be frost seeded. So that's kind of where we're at with the Headwater property. So we're on our way to converting that 29.5 acres of pine plantation to prairie, and the 7 acres earlier were cleaned up. All the box elder were cleaned up manually and burned, and that area was already planted before we even started the pine plantation restoration. So the whole property will be prairie and somewhat oak savanna along the river. There's a lot of bur oak along the river. It's not really a fishing spot because it's a wetland and the water is kind of impounded by beaver. Temperatures are probably, well, they're borderline maybe. Probably cold enough to support trout. I heard people say there's some trout up there, but when I've surveyed way back in the day, there was trout above 140th, which is the next bridge above the interstate, but there wasn't any flow at 70th, the next road up. So I can't really tell you how far the trout go up, but I suspect they're probably not in there. But anyhow, I'll give it back to Steve.
I've been here 3 years, Marty's been here going on 6 now, something like that. Thanks, what's that?
19.
19. You know, ever since Marty joined the land trust, we've had about 2 to 3, on average, probably about 2 easements per year. So thanks to Marty. What's amazing is the amount of conservation easements that we've been able to get back into. And that's a donation, about $12,000 to $15,000 from the landowner that pays for the survey, a lot of the logistics behind the easement, but also funds the stewardship fund and a legal fund to make sure that easement's always protected. So when donations come in to the land trust, we're paying Marty's time to match those donations from the easement holders. What we're getting back into, and we need to dig into this more, are the ALE grants, which is agricultural, NRC.
Farm conservation easements.
Farm conservation easements, basically. And how can we get these larger farms into an easement before we lose those as well? So we're really moving into easements more than land acquisition because of the price of land and some of the struggles with funding. But the easement drive out there is still there, especially with these interested landowners. To handle all this, we have a conservation committee. So Marty spearheads that, and individuals, volunteers like Kent Johnson are a part of that. And as we started to look at our Headwaters Preserve and the management of up there, Kent brought up this whole idea of monitoring the wetland before and after this wetland. So Kent, if you want to come up and walk us through the research that's going on that we fund. It's all led by Marty and Kent. And it's really telling a unique story on the impact of this wetland up there at the Headwaters Preserve.
Thanks, Steve and Marty, especially for all of the hard work that's going on up in the Headwaters area right now. It's phenomenal, and it will be even more phenomenal once the prairie gets established up there. Briefly, my association with KRLT began in 2006 when I was invited to participate as a board member. I joined the Conservation Committee at that time, and when my tenure as board member ended in 2012, I continued with the Conservation Committee and working on easements, working on projects such as Marty's got going, a comprehensive plan for management of all 4 KRLT preserves. So it's been a really fun process over those many years. As Steve mentioned, when the Headwaters Preserve project kicked off, which is a pretty ambitious project, Marty's done a tremendous job on it. The question arose, and I think Dave, Greg, you also asked me at one point, and Steve and Marty, if we could conduct some water monitoring in order to determine if this large-scale restoration in close proximity to the wetland and the headwaters of the Kinney would make a difference in terms of water quality. And I thought, well, there are probably a couple things we could do here. And so we had a discussion on a couple possibilities. Steve found some funding for us to kick a couple things off. Before I jump into what the monitoring program looks like, I just thought I'd maybe give you a brief primer, Wetlands 101, what is a wetland? Courtesy of the Wisconsin Wetlands Association. So basically wetlands are found at the intersection of land and water between places that are always wet and places that are always dry. The upland areas, which is characteristic of the preserve restoration work. So approximately 15% of Wisconsin is wetlands, with 75% of Wisconsin's wildlife species depending on wetland presence. That's pretty amazing when you stop to think about it. And about 50% of Wisconsin's wetlands have been lost since the 1800s, which is better than some states like Minnesota, for instance, where that figure is in the 90% lost. So we still have some opportunities for protection and preservation, similar to what's going on up at the Headwaters Preserve. As you can imagine, wetlands come in many different sizes, types, found in many places across the Wisconsin landscape. Basically, they have three characteristics. Well, one, of course, is water. They have water above or below ground for at least part of the year. So they're almost always wet, either above or below ground. Special soils, which have formed under wet conditions, and then water-loving plants, basically, which are very special types that are characteristic of these ecosystems. So not only do wetlands provide natural benefits for water and of course for wildlife, but for communities as well, especially in terms of flood control, clean drinking water, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute, fish and wildlife habitat, and then recreational opportunities. And you can see across the board there, the Headwaters Preserve does all of that for the resident community in the River Falls area and beyond. So wetlands help maintain good water quality, and they can improve degraded water quality, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute as well. They reduce sediment that comes from the landscape into the wetland area. They can remove and retain nutrients that come from the landscape into the wetland, and they can process chemical and organic materials. And before I go on, I would just say this is what you should know about rivers and wetlands, for that matter. Their identity comes from their watersheds. So if you don't remember anything else, a river is a reflection of its watershed. So you aren't going to fix a river, manage a river without managing its watershed. And that's what KRLT is all about for one of our signature rivers within our chapter jurisdiction, that being the Kinney. So this has been an amazing group to work with, and I really appreciate their work on conservation easements and acquisition of these preserve areas. So with that, kind of as a background, where did we go with the water monitoring program? And here's an overview. Let's see if I can get this. Yeah, which one is that?
This one right here.
Got it. Not, I'll just point it out.
There you go.
So we kicked off this project early in 2024 last year. Here you see the 49 acres, which are the KRLT Headwaters Preserve. So it's surrounded by some private property and some WDNR property down here, which has already been restored. And then you see this sinuous, large wetland complex that extends from 70th Avenue up here all the way down to the downstream and beyond boundary of the Headwaters Preserve. Now, to characterize water quality in that entire wetland, we decided that we should have monitoring sites at the top end, even though it's above the preserve, and at the lower end, even though it's below the preserve. So we're capturing all of what the wetland means to the preserve and beyond. So this Headwaters Preserve upper and Headwaters Preserve lower. And interestingly, this aerial imaging by Google Earth was taken recently, so you can see the logging and removal of the pine plantation that's occurred in this image.
polka dots are all the brush piles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And then just to point out, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
This is 70th right here. This is the parking lot with the easement Marty talked about that we purchased through the farm field to get back into the 40 acres.
Yeah. So I think the imaging was June of 2024. And so this is the upper site, upper monitoring station. This is 70th Avenue up here. There's a large culvert that goes underneath. And here's the top of the large wetland area. There is a channel, as Marty mentioned, on the other side, the north side of the road. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry. Since we began monitoring last year, it's always been wet. So the interesting thing I'll say about that is that the watershed does not begin at the road. It begins somewhere upstream of the road. And so this wetland area will also be affected by a portion of the Kinney watershed when it rains and when runoff occurs. And then this is the lower monitoring station at the bottom of the large wetland complex. And you could make a strong argument in case that this is where the headwaters of the Kinnickinnic River is born, right at the outlet of this large wetland complex, because it changes, it morphs into a stream at this location. So this is our second lower monitoring station. We decided to do two types of monitoring at both sites. So one is temperature monitoring to understand what the temperature regime is across the wetland complex. So we installed two of these onset tidbit temperature loggers, which can be programmed at various intervals. We chose 10-minute intervals to make temperature measurements at both locations because it corresponds with the 9 other temperature monitoring sites we have on the Kinney, from River Falls all the way down to County Road F. So we've got the whole river in sync at 10-minute intervals from mid-April through mid-October. This year was the end of October, which is kind of nice because we've got a temperature signal from top to bottom. And by the way, that's the logger. So it sits there and collects 10-minute data all summer, and it would collect 10-minute data all year without having to download it. So actually Marty and Robert and I, with Marty and Robert doing most of the work, went out and captured these two loggers this afternoon. So we've got the temperature signal for both sites for 2025. These cost about $200. They have an enclosed battery which can't be replaced, but it has a 4-year life. So for roughly $50 a year, you can collect as much temperature data on the Kinney as you want. And we've been doing that via Kiap-TU-Wish support since 1992. So this is a nice addition up in the headwaters. The other piece, the other piece of this is the water quality monitoring, where we're looking at the water chemistry of the wetland. And so we do that by collecting the sample in this bottle. We've got a long pole here which extends so you can reach from the bank and capture a water sample. And then that sample, or samples in this case, are transported to an analytical lab in St. Paul, where all of the analytes, which include total and volatile suspended solids, which impact water clarity, a whole suite of nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, which make our systems green, a lot of times undesirably green, and then a measure of that greenness in chlorophyll A concentration, which is the amount of algae present. So you'll see a little bit of that as well. I should say, on the water quality monitoring, we've been doing that seasonally. So we began last year in July, collected a sample for summer. In October, collected a sample for fall. In January of this year, we collected a sample to represent winter, and then in April, another one for spring. So that's kind of our strategy, and then hopefully we've still got funding available to collect samples during runoff, large rain events when water is more actively moving off the landscape and through the system along with the pollutants it brings with it. So that's yet to come. This is gonna be really tough to read, sorry about that, but these are temperature monitoring results in 2024, and I can kind of step you through this. By the way, after the first year was complete, I wrote a report on the first year results, and that can be found on the KRLT website. I'll give you the web address at the end. So if you're looking for more details, you can check out the report, and it'll go into more depth. These are called, these squiggly lines here are called thermographs. So that's the 10-minute data for 2024 plotted from April, near the end of April, through the end of October last year at both sites. So the blue is the upper headwater site, the green is the lower headwater site. And what you can see here is that every day the temperature fluctuates from a maximum temperature around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, to a minimum temperature at about 6 a.m. sunrise. And this happens every day, every single day. The temperature fluctuates from min to max. And that's what you're seeing here with these squiggly up and down lines in both situations. What you notice and what we expected to see is that when you have these large wetland complexes, slow flows, lots of solar radiation exposure, you suspect that those complexes will heat up the water as it moves through the wetland complex, and that's exactly what we saw here. So temperatures were higher, especially during the heat of the summer months here, downstream than upstream. So what we ended up with, and I gotta move closer to read it myself. Last year, our average water temperature in the summer, which is just June through August months, upstream was 15.6 degrees Celsius, and downstream it was 19.2 degrees Celsius. That's quite a significant difference in terms of heating the water as it moves through the wetland area. And then this line, I put this blue line across. This, by the way, is temperature over here. I should have explained this earlier. This is water temperature. This is date during the summer months. So what you see here then is that I put this blue line across at 20 degrees Celsius, and if you read the scientific literature, most consensus is the top of the optimum temperature range for brown and brook trout, Marty can speak to this too, is somewhere on the order of 19 to 20 degrees Celsius. That's the range they like to operate, and they're becoming uncomfortable as it increases above that 20-degree mark. Not that it may have a negative impact, but it can, depending on duration of time and how high the temperature actually goes. So you can see here downstream, some of these temperatures topped out at or near 24 degrees Celsius for short periods of time. But on average, over the summer months, 0.3% of these summer temperatures exceeded 20 degrees upstream. 30% of the summer temperatures downstream exceeded 20 degrees Celsius. And that's kind of the nice thing about having so much data is you can make these types of comparisons. And then we can calculate mean temperatures by month as well. And you kind of see the same picture showing up here. This is May, June, July, August, September, October means, and temperature again on the y-axis. So May means are pretty close together. This is upstream blue, downstream green, and then these temperatures start to separate in June. The separation maxes out in July and August when air temperatures are highest. And then begin to converge a little bit in September and then more so in October in the colder weather. So that's just kind of a snippet of what's going on with temperature across the wetland complex. And with the water getting to the actual headwaters of the Kinney, it's warmer than it was at the top of the wetland. So we'll see what happens with this year's data. It's different every year, essentially. And then just a couple slides here on water quality monitoring results. We have two sets of data. One was from July 2024. This one was from October 2024. Blue, upper site, green, lower site. And this is phosphorus concentrations in milligrams per liter over here. And you can see that in late July, phosphorus concentrations were pretty elevated actually at both upper and lower sites. And I think this was a function of a relatively wet spring and wet start to the summer months. So what's happening is if phosphorus is applied in the landscape, particularly in agricultural situations, it attaches to the soil. And if the soil moves off the landscape, so does the phosphorus during rain events, and it turns up in these wetland areas and in streams if there's a connection as well. So these concentrations are actually above this red line, which is Wisconsin DNR's criterion for total phosphorus in state waters. So to protect water quality from phosphorus impacts, it should be less than 75 micrograms per liter, which is the red line. So those exceeded in the spring. By fall, however, these concentrations at both sites decreased pretty dramatically below the criterion. And I suspect that is because the wetland plants sucked up the phosphorus and used it to grow green, whether it was rooted vegetation or in this case, lots of duckweed from the headwaters all the way down to the bottom of the marsh. So that's where a lot of the phosphorus ended up, I believe, and then there were fewer runoff events later in the summer, which contributed to that reduction as well. All right. Nitrate nitrogen, which is a really popular topic in this watershed and in watersheds throughout western Wisconsin and in Minnesota and all over the upper Midwest. We have this issue with nitrate nitrogen because of nitrate applied to agricultural watersheds, mostly in corn crops, to facilitate productivity. And unlike phosphorus, nitrate nitrogen is soluble, so whatever isn't taken up by plants, corn crops primarily, goes down through the soil profile with water, and it ends up where? In our groundwater. And this has been an increasing problem for many years since most communities, private wells across Minnesota and Wisconsin depend on what for drinking water? Groundwater. There are very few exceptions to that, except cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul pull their water from the Mississippi River, but most of us are drinking groundwater, and these nitrate nitrogen concentrations have been steadily increasing over the years. EPA has a limit of 10 milligrams per liter, so after that there can be public health impacts, especially to pregnant women and babies. So it's something we definitely need to monitor. And we've done similar sampling at Pine Creek and Trimble River, which show similar results. Now, so here in the Headwaters Preserve, nitrate was pretty low midsummer. This again is July, less than 1 milligram per liter. The only comparison we have is that 10 milligrams per liter public health standard, but pretty low. We notice it was lower downstream than upstream. By October, 3 milligrams per liter, but significantly less than that at the lower end. Now, this really demonstrate what wetlands can do well. Remember, I mentioned that they can have water quality benefits, and this is one of them that's really significant. So these decreases, which were evident here and even more so here, are because these wetlands house denitrifying bacteria down near the sediment. And they love slow, shallow, warm waters, oftentimes oxygen deficient. And so what these bacteria do is they'll take that nitrate molecule, it's one nitrogen atom, 3 oxygen atoms, and they split the oxygen off because they need the oxygen for respiration. So that's where they get their oxygen, but in the process they've just converted nitrate to oxygen, either used by the denitrifying bacteria and or released into the water, and we've left a nitrogen atom which is released to the atmosphere, and you no longer have nitrate nitrogen, and it's beautiful. So that's what this wetland is doing so nicely. Yeah,
Can I ask 2 questions about what you just went through there?
sure.
Why are the temperatures higher on the lower, but we see bigger fish generally on the lower than we do in the upper? Is it habitat? Is it, and then to the duckweed and the nitrogen, how does that compare to other parts of the state that are managing the farm runoff? Like, are we comparable to other parts of the state where our nitrogen levels are higher? How are we doing statewide as far as managing that farm runoff?
Good questions. As to the first, I think Marty mentioned there really are, just looking at this short expanse of the Kinney through the Headwaters Preserve, there really are not many trout up in that area whatsoever. So definitely, well, you can speak to that, Marty, but we wouldn't expect to see many.
Areas where you tend to have larger trout, generally the stream may be warmer, they have more warm water forage fish available, which they can grow larger and faster.
Okay.
The colder the stream, the less forage fish, less crayfish, and more small invertebrates. Theoretical maximum growth on invertebrates alone is 18 inches.
Okay.
So, to tell the truth, a warmer trout stream that has some warm water forage or cool water forage in it is probably gonna grow bigger trout, but have less trout. And
Got it.
very cold trout streams will have only invertebrates to eat, and there'll be much more natural reproduction and higher densities, but slower growth.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
So,
As far
you
as
might find a 20+ brown up in that pond area,
once in your life.
in any of these streams around here, Trimville, Rush, the headwaters, or
Right.
the lower end, might produce a bigger fish because of that.
Okay.
As to the second question, I'd just say this is a ubiquitous problem throughout farm country in the upper Midwest. Starting in the 70s with the Clean Water Act, we came light years in terms of water quality improvement with wastewater treatment plant discharges, industrial discharges when rivers caught on fire in Ohio. None of that is happening anymore. They're all permitted by law to clean up their acts. Unfortunately, when the Clean Water Act was written, agriculture was not a part of it. So we have been fighting that battle since the 1970s. And if you peel an onion, we just peeled off the wastewater pollution, we peeled off the industrial pollution, and now what's underneath? It's ag pollution, which probably those who wrote the Clean Water Act in the early 70s didn't even have in their vision at the time. So it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It depends on fertilizer, nitrate application rates. It depends on groundwater in hydrology and geology. So there are a lot of variations across the landscape in the upper Midwest, but that is really the issue, is it's not getting cleaned up. And it's been the subject of multiple lawsuits in Minnesota and Iowa, and it's just an ongoing problem. And maybe Steve will have a few minutes to talk about an initiative here that'll get us toward a solution. Scott?
Hi, Ken. Thanks for your presentation. Two questions, actually it's one question, just asked two different ways. What are the next issues that we're dealing with, just in the next 5 to 10 years? And what can we do in the short run to have an impact on rivers that we love, like the Kinnickinnic, the Bluebell, Katy, etc.?
I think the main issue, if we start and just look at our streams around here within the realm of our chapter advocacy, it's working on the landscape issue. And I wouldn't point the finger exclusively at agriculture, but it's becoming increasingly the problem that is coming into focus because other things have been addressed, including stormwater management. And I think you're familiar with the work the chapter's done on that, with the city of River Falls. All municipalities over 10,000 population are required to treat stormwater. So if you move into the city, you're treating stormwater by decree. So I think our advocacy and our work and KRLT's work with the agricultural producers is a really key piece of this. Because I think the producers I have met and worked with have good intentions. They're being pushed by a number of different external pressures that they're experiencing every day, every year to make ends meet and still generate food for the country and the world, really. So I get it. Legislation drives that as well, things like the Farm Bill. But I think our advocacy, keeping the focus on what agricultural producers can do better, is a key piece of our work.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Ed.
Ken, I was just wondering, what's the difference in the upper region between the top and the bottom? The 2 points of the wetlands. What was the difference between the 2 points in miles or feet?
What would you say, Marty?
No more than a half mile.
And no more than half, yeah.
Okay. So that was a pretty precipitous change in that short of a distance, it seemed like.
That's, that's one of the remarkable things that wetlands can do. Same for phosphorus reduction, because if it comes in attached to a soil particle and hits slow velocity in a big wide open space, what happens is that soil particle finally has a chance to sink to the bottom, and the phosphorus goes along with it, and oftentimes it isn't available to the algae for growth. So there are a couple things with nutrients that are really beneficial. And I've got one more slide to finish up here, if you'll bear with me. This is, again, same format, blue upper, green lower. These are chlorophyll A concentrations as determined by our laboratory. And what chlorophyll A is a measure of the green pigment that occurs, the photosynthetic pigment that occurs in algae and growing plants. So it's a surrogate for how much algae green is in the water. So in July, you can see that there's relatively little. Oftentimes that can be a reflection of increased flow and instability. Unicellular algae, even blue-green algae, and duckweed like nice, stable, calm conditions to grow. So if you get water moving in, not so much. I think that's what was happening here. And then later in the summer, when precipitation tailed off, nutrients were available, both phosphorus and nitrogen, as you saw, so we got kind of explosive growth, particularly of duckweed in the upper part, not so much in the lower part. And if I quickly back here. Duckweed, green, 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 edges are green, but not so much down here as up here, so that shows you how that chlorophyll concentration is about half downstream compared to what it was upstream, so I think I'm done, finally. Here's the 2024 report, this location on the KRLT website, and I'll be reworking it now that we've got all the 2025 data available and sometime before spring, so maybe I can follow up at some point here.
How are we doing on time?
Got some time, it's only
Okay.
8:05.
This is a nice transition into the ag community. St. Croix County, their conservation department wrote a runoff management large ag grant, received $350,000 to work with ag landowners in strictly the Upper Kinney. So anything north of River Falls, all the way up to the Kesey Lake. Any ag fields in the upper watershed were eligible for this grant. We hosted an event with the St. Croix County last February, something like that. We had about 20 farmers show up at the Kinney Township. And what was nice at hosting it at the Kinney Township, I went through their comprehensive plan last year. What's amazing is they have two goals. One is to protect their ag communities. The second is to protect the Kinney. They're trying to create a comprehensive plan and zoning to protect both. And so that's what was key, is hosting it there and getting these farmers involved, is that you can't see this here, but for the first year, this year, it's 300 linear feet of planting native plants and stream bank stabilization was done along Parker Creek. 3 landowners to implement 550 new acres of nutrient management plans to understanding how to control the nutrient on their land. 400 plus acres of cover crop were installed. They have never had so many farmers sign up. 4,000, I'm sorry, thanks Marty. 4,000 acres of the Upper Kinney is now covered in cover crop. They had one old well decommissioned, and you can see this old drainage area, this dry one was installed into a grass field. One thing they can do, they can implement the grant. They don't have the resources to tell this story, and that's where the Land Trust is stepping in. We're sharing this story, communicating it as best as we can in a lot of different avenues. Our next step is to actually work with Evan, the St. Croix County staff person up there, to interview him and the farmers to keep this momentum going, because it's another two years to implement projects like this in the Upper Kinney. So we're really thrilled that we're starting to reach out to that ag community. What's unique in the upper watershed, for the most part, you don't see the channel. They don't understand that connection to the Kinney, and that's the goal, is start to have these conversations, get these stories out. Once we got these farmers on board, how do we tell their stories so they help recruit other farmers? So we're really excited about working with St. Croix County. Again, it's this holistic picture of what we're looking at with the watershed.
So with the nutrient management, is that educational aspects to the farmers, or is it grant dollars? Because like I think about some of the fertilization practices, you can do like strip tilling as opposed to just spraying fertilizer across the whole field. You can do it right where you're planting your crops. But that is a different technology. It's often more expensive. So is there financial assistance, or is it just the educational aspect?
Nope, there's financial assistance through all this.
Okay,
So,
very cool.
yeah. What's nice with this is that they sit down with the department, go through, what project they want to do, and that money's readily available compared to not NRCS. There's always been that delay. This is kind of on-the-spot job, ground-ready projects this year, and educating the farmers to continue this effort over the next 2 years. To understand all these different stakeholders, we hired Alicia Miller. She used to be the environmental educator up in St. Croix County. We've hired her as a watershed coordinator. Years ago, there was a watershed council that got a lot of different stakeholders together to create a vision. We hired Alicia. She's only 8 hours a week. It's not a lot, but it's a start to start these conversations with all these different stakeholders. The ultimate goal is how do we form alliances with developers, communities, farmers, all the different organizations involved in the watershed to create a model for other watersheds to follow. So we're really excited about having Alicia on board. We do watershed tours now. We start all the way up in Casey and go all the way down to River Falls. Mark Ritzinger does a lot of these. What was great with this tour is that we rented a bus and Hudson Rotary brought on about 15 people. We got all on the bus and took a tour. We hit the Headwaters Preserve. We look at all the work being done in the upper watershed. We talked about nitrates as a problem. There's a nitrate hotspot right between Roberts and Hammond, and St. Croix County is trying to figure out how to address the nitrogen in those wells, which is a direct reflection on the watershed again. As Ken said, all those uses in your watershed and land uses is a reflection of that water quality. How can we control what's happening in the upper watershed before it even gets into the stream channel? We also did kind of an analysis of programming, who's doing what. The schools are doing a great job with all the school programs out there. TU always helps with the trout program. Ben Koppel does a great job with River Falls. We've also looked at St. Croix Central and the other high schools. They all do great programs, but we've identified gaps. And one big gap is our senior citizens that are in nursing homes or senior centers. They have incredible stories about growing up in this area. They grew up in farms, they fished a Kinney, and for many reasons they can't get out. So we're bringing the outdoors in to them in the senior centers, and we're getting them out. And this is a great story right here. This gentleman right here is in one of these track chairs. I don't know if you've seen those or not. He lives in River Falls. He retired as a Minnesota fisheries biologist 10 years ago, and Parkinson hit him. It hit him pretty hard. He was not able to get back into the Kinney until we got him into this track chair this summer and got him back into the water. It's an incredible experience, let alone these individuals have incredible stories to share about what it was like growing up in this area, the changes over time. And so the senior program has been really excited to launch over the last year. Ready Together is working with special need kids right now we work with St. Croix Central, Prescott, Ellsworth, and River Falls. That was another gap, is that the special education students are engaged in classes, but they're not getting outside and not connected to the outdoors as much. Working with these teachers, and our goal is to work with special education students in St. Croix and Pierce County, is having them help us grow pollinator plants and native plants in the classroom. They're getting their hands dirty, they're understanding the plant life cycle. They also help with pollinators. They grow raised butterflies for us. It's a way to get them engaged. Our ultimate goal with this is that how can we transition them and teach them skills so when they do graduate, we have an outdoor experience for them in a nursery or whatever, where these individuals can help us work on our preserves, help plant gardens or whatever in nursing homes, and kind of create a nursery and teach them those skills. So many of these kids have autistic issues and things like that, that in an indoor setting like a grocery store or whatever, and those fluorescent lights just set them off. But everyone has something to contribute. And can we create an outdoor experience to help us really understand what we can do in our watershed, what people can do in their own backyard, let alone get them engaged in an outdoor setting. Kinney Explorers is a way to get families out using our preserves. I got our booklet up over here on working with families. It wasn't set programs as much as just encouraging people to get out and explore our preserves. And thanks to you as a sponsor and many other sponsors, we ran Nature Fest just north of town. It's the first Saturday of October. We're getting all kinds of families out there, seniors out there. What's great there at the Green Pastures Family Farm, you can walk right into the Kinney, and it's only knee deep. And so the kids and families and the seniors are able to get into the river, explore the river, and it's just a great event. So thank you for your support for sponsoring that. And then the funding, we're dependent on our memberships, donations that come in, a lot of different avenues. You know, we want to diversify our portfolio in a lot of different ways, ending with where over the last year we started launching a planned giving program to write the land trust in your will. I've got brochures up on that. It's a way that we can sustain our operations and look holistically. Our goal is to create a model for the Kinney, and in the future, can we take that model and look at other opportunities like the Rush and others. It all starts with a community grassroots movement to understand what a incredible resource this is and how can everybody do their own little part to help protect the Kinney. So I just want to say, you know, thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate Kent, Marty, all the volunteers that have helped us over the last year, and all our members. So thank you very much.
Thanks for everything. I mean, the depth and the breadth of what's been shared is fantastic. I'm so glad that we had you come, and Kent, you added the dimension that we had discussed last month also, so it's even an extra layer to that, but this was tremendous. Thank you.